It's been up in the Northern Hemisphere. What is behind all this madness?
Well, I think it's 15 years of leverage, John. Really, it's all coming home to roost. You know, we're reaping it now. It started in 87. We got out of that by central banks bailing out the markets. It came again in 98 when long-term capital went over, that big hedge fund. Again, the Fed bailed them out. Said, keep partying, no problems. 2002 to 2002, same sort of thing with the tech crash, all off leverage again. Again, the Fed came in, and now 2008, same sort of thing. So what we've seen, the common theme right through this, and it's what the economists call the moral hazard, is every time the central banks come in and save us, we say, come on, boys, double or quits. It's quite clear that there's really no risk if you just keep borrowing. And the actual prudential backing of this borrowing over the last 2 or 3 years has been horrendously poor. And it's across the world. It's not just America.
So the Fed comes in and saves, for example, AIG. But were they not to do that, it would have been calamitous. The Fed is damned if they do, damned if they don't, aren't they?
Yeah, well, you know, if you owe the bank and you can't pay, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
But if the whole population owes the bank and can't pay, the bank's got the problem. So the Fed's in there saving the system, and they saved it with Bear Stearns, they've saved it with Fannie and Freddie, and now they've had to do it with AIG.
Yeah.
Who's next week? I can't answer that, but all I'm saying to you is it's a legacy of this sort of steroids that we've been running on, all this sort of leverage. And New Zealand's one of the most leveraged economies in the world, by the way.
We're going to talk about New Zealand in a sec, but Gareth, just before we came on here, we received an email from someone saying, hey, what about the free market? If the market is always right, why is the state, in the terms of as the Fed is doing in the States, providing a safety blanket for a safety net for market inadequacies?
Because the system has, the problems become so big that the system's under threat. And certainly the market would solve it. But the market would solve it with a bloody great depression like we had in the 30s and, unemployment queues and all that misery. And it's trying to get the balance to stop the excess on the one hand, but not allow it to run and have the big harsh landing on the other, and that's the path they've been trying to tread. But it's now 20 years, John, and we've seen all along this period that the level of leverage has just gone up and up across, a lot of the world. New Zealand, Australia and the US would be cases in point. Let's
talk about New Zealand, Gareth, and before we do so, we went to an auction today to see how the property market is looking at the beginning of spring. Simon Shepherd took a look.
An opening bid. One at a time.
From the start, it was hard going. 12 properties on the block. Up first, a two-bedroom apartment.
So $206,000, cash bid, more required. How much more? Time the buyers and the market will tell us.
And so it went on, bids sometimes dropping down to $1,000.
For $1,000 you lose it, it is going.
Our fortnightly auctions, we usually have what we had there, which was 150 to 200 people, but as you could see today, most of them had their hands in their pockets.
Now, do you think that the uncertainty about the world financial situation is filtering down to this level?
I think, unfortunately, a lot of our buyers today read the Herald this morning. So, yeah, that sort of shockwave does give people a fright.
Once, twice, third final, nobody else. It's going, 270. It's gone. Thank you very much indeed. $270,000.
With 5 out of 12 sold at the auctions today, even with a big crowd, that was hard work.
Gareth, what's going on here, and will what's happening in the States make it any worse?
Yes, it will make it worse. New Zealand, as I said earlier, is one of the most leveraged economies there is. Here we are, record prices for our exports. They're just unbelievable. And yet we have a record balance of payments deficit. Good God, imagine if prices were just normal, how big that deficit would be.
Yeah.
So all of this money that's been coming into New Zealand from overseas, we know, you know as well as I do, John, where we put it. We've all put it in the property market. So the most leveraged part of our economy is the property market. And when you do the sort of calculations on what's a sustainable value for property, I think my own view on it is that house prices in New Zealand, in real terms, have to fall 30%, 30. Now, when I bought my first house, the average price for a first house was twice the graduate salary.
Yeah.
It is now 8 times the graduate salary. So that's the sort of distortion that's occurred. Now, the only argument, in my view, is does it occur, you know, that 30% fall in real prices by sort of 20%, a 10% fall, say, occurring, and then 4 years of inflation at 5 giving you the other 20? Or does it occur harsher than that, and a 20% fall in only 2 years of inflation? So does it take 2 years or 4 years?
Have you got a feeling which of those two it's going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be fast.
Is it?
I think the dam is going to break and it's going to be quick. Look, I've just been involved in a property in Wanaka that's having to be sold.
Yep.
And, you know, it's got to be sold, this property. It's a big property, a lot of money here. And it's got to be sold at a quarter of its most recent valuation, and they're still stretching, and it must be sold in the next 20 days. So it just gives you an idea. And in the UK, where I've just come from, all the articles, it's crashing over there, the articles are that what you do when you're buying a property, just before you go to put the money across, John, just before you do that, you knock another 20% off, and they'll take it.
Gareth Morgan, even though the news is grim, it's great to talk to you as always. Gareth Morgan from Gareth Morgan Investments. Cheers, Gareth.